Hello everyone. Now, I haven't been posting vids in a few days, and that's mostly because I have been looking into the new captain skills. And there is a lot to digest here. They have basically reworked the commanders from the ground up. There are some familiar skills, but they have been moved in the tree, they cost different or they work different, and there have been entirely new skills added as well. So instead of trying to cram this into one huge vid, where people will probably skip over half of it because it's going to end up being so bloated, I'm going to be dividing it up into three different videos. In this first one, we're going to be looking into battleships. Now you note that I have selected the Große Kurfürst, and that's because German builds will change, especially German secondary builds. They will change significantly because, well, note that these are not finalized, but I need to show you first this graph, or these numbers. This is basically what Wargaming is intending to do. They're intending to change the range on the secondaries. Note that if your secondaries are less than they are in this graph, they're not going to be nerfed. All they're doing is increasing ranges. Obviously, what's greatly influenced here is the Germans. The French secondary builds are kind of garbage, but especially German secondary builds, because of that increased penetration, they tend to be quite a gimmick. Secondary Kurfürst, pretty common. You got secondary Pommern, secondary FDG, secondary Odin. Like secondaries, they're all secondary Bismarck, Tirpitz. These are the OG memes. A lot of people run them because they're quite fun. Not necessarily the most competitive builds, but quite fun. So idea of the range going from 11.6 on a full build to 12.5. As you can see on the graph, 900 meters extra range. This sounds like a pretty nice buff. But this is not the case. In fact, in my testing I have found that the secondary builds on the Germans have become absolute garbage on PTS. And the culprit for this is this skill right here. Secondary Battery Expert. Now, this might look familiar. Manual secondaries. In the past, it used to reduce your dispersion, was it by 60-65%? Basically, it was almost twice as good. Now, you might think that, but they're changing it. In the past, if you selected a target as a manual secondary skill, your secondaries would only fire on that guy, and they wouldn't even activate unless you selected him. But with this new skill, your secondaries can shoot at everything, but they get better dispersion on the one that you're focus firing. Now, this is how people have wanted manual secondaries to work for a long time, because what's the point of the secondaries not firing? Like, your left-hand secondaries aren't shooting on anything just because your right-hand secondaries are shooting. It never made any sense. So in a way, they've listened to us like, yay, both sides are gonna be shooting. But the downside here is that they have nerfed the absolute living bejesus out of this skill. Now, I'm gonna show you a couple of videos, a couple of examples, because honestly, it's better to show than to tell. What you saw in the Georgia clip was American secondaries, which obviously have significantly better dispersion than German secondaries. What I'm showing you right now is a very simple test. This is on the live server, on the current server. This is a full secondary Kurfürst running manual secondaries. The test is very simple. You spawn in on a map, on an ocean with the ST test server, and the Des Moines always spawns at 11.6 km away, and your secondaries can always fire, so you just manually select him, and then you shoot your secondaries for 2 minutes, and you turn it off. You turn it off exactly at the 2-minute marker. I did this test a fair few times, and as you can see on the live server, well, the Des Moines pretty much always dies to the secondaries. I turn off the secondaries, the remaining things hit him, and the fires kill him, and that's pretty much the end of it. This is still on the live server. The problem, however, is on the PTS server, well, you no longer have that 60% accuracy reduction or improvement, but you have 35. And what this means in actuality is that, well, this Des Moines that I'm easily farming to death on the live server, sometimes even before the 2 minutes is up, on PTS it is a completely different story. The amount of shells fired is still the same, roughly about 460 plus during this 2-minute timer, but the difference in accuracy is monumental. And the damage output absolutely plummets. 2 minutes is up, and I find myself, I have to use the guns to finish this guy off, because, well, I have to turn off my secondaries to not skew my results. So in order to get to the score screen and get that same 460-ish hits, I have to turn them off and then kill them with my main guns. On a live server, that basically never happened. On PTS, Des Moines has half HP. In general, the damage output has completely plummeted. The consistency of the secondaries have completely gone out of the window. Note that their fix to this is increasing the range, How on earth is giving extra range, which is gonna mean even wider dispersion, gonna help this situation here that, well, your output is basically halved? This is just garbage. Secondary builds on German Battleship don't work at all because manual secondaries is nerfed to the extent that yes, you can shoot in many different directions, and yes, you will be able to shoot even further away, but you absolutely cannot hit the broadside of a barn. And this is with this guy being selected as the manual target. Now imagine with him not being selected as the manual target, and then you can imagine just how terrible the damage output is. Absolutely disastrously bad. So this means right now on PTS, secondary German builds are dead. They're just straight up dead and buried, non-existent. Massachusetts, Ohio, Georgia, these all have improved American dispersion, so they do a bit better. I mean, their damage output has gone down as well. Their hit percentage has gone from something 40 plus to about 30-ish, so not as steep of a drop-off, and still 4 points when you have 21 isn't quite as bad, but I mean, even they suffer a bit, but nowhere nearly as bad as the German ones. So right now on PTS, German secondary builds dead. Completely dead and buried. Sad but true, especially because Pommern is a ship that I basically built around secondaries, and I haven't even had the heart to take it out on PTS because watching the output with these other ships has been so damn depressing. Generally speaking, there are still a bunch of skills that you still want. You want Gunfeeder, aka Expert Loader. That's pretty much standard. I love Priority Target. It's actually a recommended skill. That little triangle indicates it's recommended. There's a bunch of skills that, well, there's 2-point IFHE, but honestly, what battleship are you really gonna spec that on? There is the Turret Traverse, which is always nice, 2-pointer, but they changed the way it works, which I really don't like. In the past, it kind of gave everyone a similar type of buff, or if you had, it especially benefited battleships with slow turrets. But the way it does now is it gives you plus 20% to your traverse speed. So if your traverse speed is already fast, you gain a larger benefit. But if your traverse speed is slow, you get a smaller benefit. So what this means is that ships that already have had a really good traverse speed, like Kremlin, they get a bigger bonus, whereas ships that had a really poor one, like Yamato, well, they get an even smaller bonus. I have no idea why they felt this was a good idea, but that's the way they've changed this skill, so I don't know why. That's the way it has changed. There's some consumable buffs. There's Demo Expert, which is a 1-point skill, but only gives 1%, so you're basically not going to notice it. Watchful Eye, Incoming Fire is here. Emergency Repair Special. The 1-pointers, most of them, besides really Expert Loader and potentially Preventive Maintenance, kind of sketchy, generally speaking. There are some AA builds, I will get into those, that have maybe gotten slightly better, like 10% continuous, 10% damage, and then we have this one, which is AA Gun Expert, which is more priority sector AA damage and number of flak. The problem is, of course, that carrier damage output has also gone up quite a bit. Note that Rock Solid is actually better than I thought. My first impression was that this was going to give you 10%, meaning you go from 29, you gain 10%, aka 2.9%, and you go up to about 32%, but it's actually a flat bonus. So if you equip it, you gain straight up 10%. So this means that Rock Solid is actually better than I first assumed. Of course, remember that some ships like carriers, well, they get a flat out 15% debuff, so even if you run this, carrier is going to take 15% straight away from that, so questionable value there. Survivability Experts is basics of survivability. AR is now a 3-point skill, so more expensive, but I mean it's still basically must have, and it has continuous AA damage buff as well. So it does, the lower HP you go, the more effective your AA is. The downside here is, of course, if you're going low in a battleship, you've probably got an HE spam to the point that your AA is basically broken. So this one is very much still extremely relevant. Auxiliary Ballistics Expert, it's kind of AFT without the flak and just a secondary bonus. It's 20% range for 1 point less, but less effective overall. Armor Piercer seems complete garbage. I've tried it. Armor Piercer, basically, it gives you 5% AP damage. Not exactly impressive. You go from 12 on a Slav, you go from 12.1 to a impressive 12.7. But in return, fires burn for 30% longer, And flooding lasts 30% longer. Not something you ever really want on a battleship. The trade-off is pretty damn terrible. Well, I'll get into that skill. Fire prevention, still basically must-have. Like, the skills that used to be really must-have, well, I feel like they're still really must-have. Besides a bunch of testing and fun people are doing on PTS, the skills that used to be really good are still really good, because that's the way they work. You don't want to burn. Concealment expert, still absolutely top-notch, especially because of some synergy I'll get into later. And then, of course, this is a bit weird. Superintendent is different now. It's been moved to a 4-point skill. It no longer includes the other consumables. The other consumables are separate, removed from it entirely. So all this does it give you a heal and damage con if you're Soviet, and of course increases the duration of these. Still pretty damn good if you want to go for any sort of brawling tanky build, or if you got a fast reloading heal. Or if you're a Soviet battleship, it's basically a fantastic, but a point more expensive. So this is the standard, I'd say, probably basic tanky battleship build. You got a point left, you can run on preventive maintenance, basically. Pretty standard battleship build right there. Now what I did mention, they have this one, main gun and secondary battery reload expert, which means 10% secondary battery. Note that of course BFT is gone. So this is kind of the BFT for battleships now, but it does have an activated effect, which means that if increases the reload speed of the main battery after an enemy has been spotted within the firing range of your ship's secondary battery. So this thing has nice synergy with secondary builds, and I actually like this quite a bit on the Georgia. The clip you saw earlier, I had this skill active there, which means that I had faster reload on my main guns because my secondaries were firing. Nice synergy, fits really well with them. Obviously, as I mentioned, though, building secondaries on Germans, not really that valuable anymore because this thing here has gotten butchered so hard. What I do want to get into here, and my next example, which I think is probably one of the poorest choices they've made, is this skill, Dead Eye. Increases the firing accuracy of the main battery if there are no visible hostile ships within the ship's standard detectability radius. Now what this means is that, well, first of all, you want to go concealment expert if you go Deadeye, for obvious reasons. You want no one to be spotted within the range of your own detectability. So if my concealment is 13.2, I don't want any spotted ships to be within 13.2 kilometers. If there are no spotted ships within 13.2, I get a pretty massive 10% dispersion buff. That's like old Yamato Legendary before they nerfed it because they felt it was too powerful. That's how good of a skill that is. But in terms of game design, what a disaster! What an absolute disaster! This is a skill that tells you sit so far back in your battleship that no one is literally within your normal detection range. Sit so far back that if you don't shoot, you're basically undetected, or if you're detected, it's because some DD guy that you can't even spot. It encourages backline sniping. It encourages sitting back to make use of this better dispersion. Even worse is, if you're in a situation where you're shooting a guy, and you're at the same time spotting someone else. Someone else is like 11 kilometers away and you're spotting him. If you don't want to shoot that guy, let's say it's a nose in the Kremlin or something, you don't want to shoot him, you want to shoot someone else, you're actually better off running away and basically stopping your spotting of him. You don't want to spot him anymore. You want to kite away and leave him in the dark because that benefits you more. Of course, it doesn't benefit your team. Your team probably needed your spotting to be able to shoot him, but you running away benefited yourself. So you don't want to be spotting anyone, and you don't want to be within the range of anyone in order to activate this Dead Eye bonus. I don't need to explain to you just how much passive play this encourages, how much camping this encourages. Already on PTS, half the battleships are running, probably more are running this skill, and they're all sitting even further back than now. They're sitting miles away, just taking sniping pot shots because they want to make use of this Deadeye skill. This is a terrible design. I don't know who came up with this, but we've been trying so hard to get some sort of aggression out of in the game, so sort of brawling into the game, but what do Wargaming do? They nerf the secondary accuracy, and then they introduce this skill. Add in a bunch of other stuff like carriers ignoring torpedo protection and the new torpedo boost skills that make torpedoes even faster than before, which means even if you have Hydra you can't dodge them. Like, Where are they trying to lead this game when they introduce a skill like Deadeye? If this isn't encouraging camping, I don't know what is. This is the ultimate camping skill, and it's a terrible idea. Now, on a slightly more positive side, I did mention that I had tried the AA build, especially on the Vermont, because of course Vermont does get access to defensive AA, and Vermont is generally considered a pretty juicy target to strike because it's huge and vulnerable and clumsy, and basically it can't avoid your strikes, it can't outrun you in any way, and it's just a very farmable ship to be targeting. So I basically went full ham. And when I mean full ham, I mean defensive AA mod 1, AA guns mod 1, and even the 3 million auxiliary armaments mod 2. So we're talking full stack AA build. And I even mixed in, well, obviously preventive maintenance for this one, some additional reduction on the cooldown of things like defensive AA, and then of course we have the shrapnel dealer, which is 10% continuous and 10% damage from AA shell for 2 points, and this one which is priority sector plus 25%, plus the standard tank build, which is of course fire prevention and emergency repair. And then we had the new AR, which also improves your continuous AA damage. All of this combined made me feel actually like I was doing something against carriers. I know, right? Basically, if you abandon everything else and you put all your points into countering that one class, then you can kind of do something about it. I'm not saying I could stop his strikes. No, I've tested it. People have been able to strike me. I can show you actually some gameplay clips of fighting against the Immelmann, which has the new skip bombers, which you're all going to be able to enjoy. So coming soon to a live server near you. I think it was Wargaming Dev that was actually playing the Immelmann on the PTS, and he was striking me, but I basically felt fairly comfortable fighting against him, which was a nice change. I mean, the values that you actually get out of this are pretty insane. I mean, if you look at the continuous damage, for example, the short range is 563 and the mid range is 712. And then you add in the bonus from the reinforced sector plus the 25 from AA gun aiming expert, and then you add in the defensive AA bonus, and all of this combined actually made the AA kind of disgusting. I felt like when the carrier was coming in to strike me, I was kind of shredding his squadrons. Now, it didn't really stop him from going around and striking everyone else and just basically avoiding me, but it was kind of felt a bit like, wow, I actually made the carrier choose someone else. That's pretty hard to do nowadays in World of Warships, making the carrier choose someone else, but AA builds seem, if you go full ham on them, they actually do something now. Obviously, few people will probably go full AA build because, well, you're basically giving up everything else in your ship. You're giving up reload, you're giving up range, you're giving up concealment, you're leaving yourself vulnerable to all the other ships. But I had some nice carries, and especially because there's a bunch of CVs on PTS, or sometimes even 2 CVs. The Vermont, especially with defensive AA, and some of the other AA ships that I tried, seem to do pretty well. I will get into the cruiser and the DD AA later on, but at least the Battleship AA build, executing it did feel more comfortable. Of course, Vermont with defensive AA is a bit of a unique case, and not all other ships will be able to execute the same kind of stacking of continuous damage and so forth, to the point that, well, the big issue, of course, with flak right now is that if the carrier avoids your flak, if you don't have continuous damage, then you can't do anything about it. The thing with this build on Vermont is that you can stack continuous damage to such an absurd degree that it doesn't matter if the carrier dodges your flak, the planes will still die. So at least we can end it on a somewhat positive note. I feel like there has been some AA increase here. The AA is a bit more effective, at least if you build for it. Obviously nowhere near where it should be, and obviously I can't defend anyone else, and if he really wants to strike me, he can still strike me. But compared to the absolute disaster we have now, it feels a bit better, I guess. The fundamental issues on PTS are huge though. This skill rework is not ready for a live release by any means. I don't know why they felt the need to butcher the secondaries. I don't know what they were thinking with the marksman skill. These are all, or the Deadeye skill, these are all just a joke. They both increase. You don't want to build secondaries, so instead you go the sniper skill, It's just terrible ideas. I don't know where they're going with this, but maybe I would say, oh, but it's still in testing, but they're actually hoping to squeeze it in the next patch. And they're kind of, we're doing it live, we're gonna test it live. And honestly, it sounds like a recipe for disaster. Still though, that was my initial take on these battleship skills. We'll see what they will change and if they will try to fix or do something. The idea of being able to run the same captain on multiple different ship classes, I like it. I like the concept with what they're going for here, but these skills still need a lot of work, man. They still need a lot of work. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And if you feel like it, do drop a subscription to my channel. I actually quite appreciate that. And it's the best way you can support me. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys next time. Have a great one.